Good evening and welcome to the October 5th Board Workshop meeting. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Pickle-Antonio?
Here.
Mrs. Mooring?
Here.
Mrs. Coates?
Here.
Mrs. Horn?
Here.
Mr. Manley?
Here. Can all please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Are there any recommended changes to tonight's agenda at all? Okay. Is there a motion then to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Coates. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Yes. Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle-Antonio?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Looks like we are going to begin with a presentation of our 2-year equity action plan. And I think I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Elliott.
Yes, there are several.
Okay.
Good evening, and thank you for welcoming us tonight to share a summary of the progress that we have made on our Equity and Access Plan and to give a brief overview of our Year 2 work. With me tonight are 4 fantastic district leaders that are helping to lead this work and serve as facilitators on our action teams. We have Tia Hollivan, our Director of Curriculum, Shay Reed, our Director of Human Resources. Both of these wonderful ladies also served as facilitators on action teams last year. We have Dr. Colleen Boyle, who served on an action team, and this year she's stepping into the facilitator role for us, so we're excited to have her on our district team. And then we also have Marvella Allen, our Coordinator of Mental Health and Wellbeing, who is stepping into the facilitator role for our Sense of Belonging action team. So such a pleasure to work with these ladies on moving this plan forward. The last time we were here was over a year ago. It was July of 2022, and we had just finalized our goal statements and action steps. And you have that document in front of you that outlines all of those pieces. At that time, we were preparing to re-engage our staff and to outline implementation tasks. And this is just an overview of kind of what that implementation task drafting looks like and how we track it and how we would work through it over the course of the year. You may remember that we originally had over 100 staff members that joined our teams back in 2021 to start the drafting process. And then we went back to our staff at the beginning of last year, and we had 51 staff members choose to continue the work and participate in the action teams. So the work we're highlighting today is what was completed in the 22-23 school year with those 51 staff members. In addition to our action teams, as you know, we have our parent advisory group. We engaged our equity parent advisory group and worked with them 3 times over the course of the year. They serve as great partners in the work, and we were able to vet ideas. They served as accountability partners for us as we were sharing data and the work over the course of the year. And also we had a great opportunity to pull their feedback and pull from their expertise. And so many of the things that we talked about with the action team will kind of be highlighted, with the parent advisory group will be highlighted as we go through some of our action steps this evening. Overall, we feel really proud of the work that we've accomplished. There are some focus areas where we were able to complete the action step in its entirety, and there are some action steps that will highlight that, the work started, but we need to continue and kind of move it into year 2. So you'll see those things reflected in our presentation this evening. We are going to start out by hearing from Marvella Allen about the sense of belonging work. And as you know, Marvella is new to us this year, so she has stepped into the role and has been working really hard to get caught up to speed on all the work that's been done with our sense of belonging team. And so I'm going to pass it over to her to kick it off.
Thank you. Okay. She's taller than me. Oh, sorry. Normally we get the message.
I didn't get that memo, I'm sorry. So, sorry. Okay. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity to share a little bit about the Sense of Belonging Committee and the things that were started and completed last year, as well as what will continue to move forward and continue to grow this year. Sense of Belonging Goal 1 is implementing purposeful programming and increase access to high-interest groups and activities in every building. So if you see on the action steps, we have four action steps that we were looking to accomplish in year 1. We're able to accomplish 3 of them with 1 that will carry over. So those action steps surround our panorama survey, around creating small learning communities, around piloting a peer-to-peer student mentoring program, and really looking at data to around sense of belonging and interests for our high school students. Oh, I have this slide. Maybe. I went too much. So I'll start with looking at panorama. If you see here, this is just specifically looking at our panorama sense of belonging data, and this data is reflective through starting fall 2021 through spring of 2023. And so when you look at it, it was important to be able to share that whole range to just show that fall tends to have a higher sense of belonging rate as we're coming into the school year. Spring tends to dip a little bit, but that is very typical nationwide. So even when you look at 3 to 5, grades 3 through 5, and that spring of 23, they had 67% students who said, I feel a sense of belonging. That is still falls within the 80th percentile range nationally. In regards to the 6th through 12th grades, a little lower. When you see that, though, over the course of the last 4 survey administrations, it's been pretty consistent. Up until the end of last year in the spring, it dipped a little bit. And so that's where we're going to be really intentional when we look at the tasks that we have to implement around sense of belonging for our high school students, and really hoping to see that increase when we go into looking at data at the end of this school year. To break down things a little further, the peer-to-peer mentoring. This year, we did a pilot last year of those 3 schools up there, Chapel Field in West, Lincoln in South, and High Point in East. So 52 students were identified and connected as a part of that mentoring program. 18 from Chapel Field in West, 18 from Lincoln in South, and 16 from High Point in East. And all of those students really got to just benefit from the opportunity to connect with each other. When we look at the access to clubs, really focusing on high school and kind of what are the voice of high school students, 92 high school students were interviewed in small groups with counselors and the mental health team, and they took 92 students from a very diverse representation of the student population. And they wanted to know, kind of looking at, they asked questions around sense of belonging and feeling respected and feeling connected, as well as what are the opportunities for things that you guys can participate and engage and get involved in the high school. Various responses around the sense of feeling respected, connected, and those things, but that kind of goes along with what we're seeing in the panorama survey. So when we looked at access to activities and clubs and sports, what the students shared, the survey revealed that there's a wealth of activities for students to participate in. And actually, the one thing that came out is a couple students said it would be nice to be able to have more clubs to choose from. But when I dug deep in there, they didn't identify what clubs. So that lets us know that there's room to kind of ask a little bit more about what is missing to you guys. In addition to that, it was nice to see that many students were able to identify at least one student, one adult in the building that they felt connected to. In regards to building-based small learning communities, we're really looking at that the building's principals have implemented teams that support the practice of small learning communities in their buildings. And so they do that by doing regular meetings, whether it's monthly or weekly, to really increase those positive relationships between students and staff. And those small learning communities are grounded in connection activities, sense of belonging, things that will really build relationships and really work on those social emotional skills. Right now, Middle School West is one of the buildings has implemented is in full implementation of their small learning communities. But every single building in the district is doing something to increase connections between their students and their staff, which is really amazing to see. When we look at Goal 2 for the sense of belonging, increase staff, student, and community understanding of the diversity in our school community, that first goal is really about providing professional development to staff around our marginalized groups. That is something that will happen continuously as we work to strengthen just that information, and that's information that all of us can continue to fill our toolboxes with. This year, though, I'll go on, but that's something that is carried on, knowing that we will continue to do that. I will say in September 25th, our district PD, there was a training that specifically addressed suicide prevention for our Black youth. So we're already there and trying to really be intentional about that programming or those professional learning opportunities. And in regards to creating a shared quarterly Celebrate Our School Community newsletter, that's something that we were not able to fully implement or navigate last year, so we'll make that a priority this year. And understanding that there are already really amazing things happening in the district that uplift and highlight the different ways that schools are showing that connection and sharing how we're supporting families in diverse communities. So I'm going to hand this over.
Would it be
Oh, yes,
possible,
sir.
instead of holding questions till the very end, could we maybe, I just think,
My action team?
yeah, if
Okay.
that's okay? Okay.
Absolutely.
So could I hold you for just a second? I know I have one question. Does anybody, Mrs. Coates, did you have a question? Yeah, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for all this great work. I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly on the peer-to-peer mentoring program. You said 52 students identified and connected, so total mentee and
Total.
mentor? Okay.
Yes.
Wanted to make sure I heard that right. And then, love hearing that Middle School West did the full implementation of the houses or communities. Is the goal that every school will be doing a full implementation, or is it more kind of what their culture needs, kind of flexibility? I'm just curious.
I think the goal is always that we work toward full implementation of programming that supports our students. We do know that Middle School East is right behind Middle School West in full implementation of those house programs. Ultimately, that's what we like to see, but I think the best thing we can do is really work to support buildings where they're at and fill in any gaps that they're identifying so that we can strengthen just the different systems they have in their building to eventually get to full implementation of those house systems or things that are similar. Really, we're talking about small learning communities that really allow for connection and sense of belonging and creating community. So how do we strengthen those in a way that are intentional in every building? But they're all doing it, so that's good.
If I could add to that also, we did have, our original intent was to have everyone doing the house system, and I think at one point we had talked about that. But when we went to our building teams, you know, we were able to really dive into what they already had going, some things that they had already started, and it didn't make sense for everyone to make the shift to this one particular system, so we kind of expanded that concept of small learning communities, and it looks different in different buildings. But as Marvella said, you know, it's not necessarily the house system in every building, but there are small learning communities being implemented in every building.
Okay.
that have like the same expectations of that connection piece. So it may be a different structure, but still meeting the same goals.
So many of them that I spoke with personally were, they are small learning communities where students are identified and connected to an adult that will lead those like SEL, team building, relationship building activities with that particular group of students. So when you have your, whether it's called zones or whether it's called prides or whether it's called homerooms, you're seeing those same students, they're connected with that same adult. So there's two things going on there. There's opportunity for students to build relationships with each other, but also to at least have one positive adult in the building that they're connected to.
I love that, you know, you started with a plan, but that you were flexible as you talked and found out what was right for the culture of each location. I think that was wonderful. One last question. measurements for success. Is it the panorama survey and seeing, like, based on maybe what strategy was used in that particular building? Are you looking at panorama to show there's like an increase in sense of belonging, so that's working, or no, this isn't laying flat, we need to kind of like adjust it? Is that
I
your measure?
think Panorama is a great foundation because it really is giving the students the opportunity to share where they are. I think there's also room for making sure that we're having some pre and post tests or surveys going out for students in regards to how do I feel at the beginning, how do I feel at the end of the year. And then really just some opportunities to connect and gather qualitative feedback, because that's where you get a lot of the meat of how the things that you're doing are impacting people.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Manley?
It's great to hear your presentation. Thank you. And I just want to say I'm really inspired by your intentional outreach to the marginalized communities and specifically Black suicidality. And I look forward to your short-term and long-term results. And I just feel overall really inspired by the 3-year plan, 5-year plan, but looking forward to great results. And I know that that's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. I will pass it off to diversity.
Oh, not yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry. I know I have two
trying to run
questions. Yeah, I always ask mine last, but I don't know if there's questions over here
Sorry, Ms.
first.
Horn, or-
Did you have a question, Mrs. Horn? Sorry, and when she's done, I'm holding.
I
on.
won't run away.
Just real quick, on the celebrating our school community, is that intended for the festival? Because I know, like, didn't Lincoln Elementary, a couple of the buildings already have it. Is it district-wide, or is it by building? What are the thoughts
So I
with that?
think what I know for sure is on September 6th, Middle School West had a district-wide EL fun day for families. I also know that other buildings are also planning that coming up in the fall at Goshen Lane. I don't remember off the top of my head because I wrote them down. Black Lake, Jefferson, High Point. So those things are being planned in multiple buildings. I know that for sure September 6th, we had a district-wide one at Middle School West.
It's more, each building is going to be geared to their own versus a district-wide, which I'm fine with. I just wanted to clarify what.
Right. Well, the original intent was that we would end with one district culminating, come together, let's celebrate that diversity across the entire district. But we know specifically with our EL programming, we've had some of those individual building events already in place. So it's just a matter of, kind of tweaking and pulling together so that we don't want to stop what's happening at individual buildings, but we also want to be able to, come together as one family and celebrate all together.
And that is one of our goals for year 2, so I'm looking forward to that. Absolutely, thank you.
I'm going to hold it to, I have more, but I'm going to just ask the two that I said I was going to ask. So the first question I have is, are you able to tell us a little bit, like, what is peer-to-peer mentoring? What happens? Is that academic tutoring? Is it sitting and reading a book together? Like, what is it that the students are doing?
So what it looked like, my understanding based on what I read about how it looked like last year, was the middle school students who were identified were actually, the reason they picked those 6 schools was because it was easy to get the middle school students to the elementary school students. So it sounds as if they started with the needs of elementary school students and then paired those with middle school students. They had all assembly for the middle school students to talk about what this is, why this is important, and give them the opportunity to express interest in being mentors. And so once those students were identified, so the elementary school students were identified and shared by school counselors and shared with the middle school counselors, they then were really intentional trying to match the middle school with the elementary. And then they coordinated dates and times where the middle school walked over to the elementary. And a lot of what they did was not academic, it was really peer-to-peer, trying to create those relationships with someone older than them that were positive. And one of the things I also heard is they gave opportunities for the elementary school kids to ask questions of the middle school kids, about middle school and what to expect and different things like that. So it was really about building those peer connections.
That's fantastic and has so much potential. as it expands. I just think it's wonderful. The second question that I guess, that I'm going to ask tonight is related to sense of belonging. How do you, or how does the team gather information about what might be missing in the district for a particular student or group of students who aren't feeling a sense of belonging? And by that I mean not necessarily clubs, but like, are they not seeing books in the library that help them feel connected? Like, how does the district gather that information about what might be missing? Yeah.
So I love that question. That's why I'm smiling. I think that is something that I too have been kind of milling over for how we navigate into this school year, to be intentional about finding ways to really pull in student voice to identify where the gaps are, rather than myself as an adult trying to say where I think they are. And then how do we then take the opportunity to, whether it's via survey, even have a secondary level of connection, small group opportunity for students to share a little more, and then figure out, when we get that information back, looking at it and saying, what are the things that are in our power, our locus of control, to do something about, and how then do we take steps to say, what can we do, even if it's just one little step at a time, to create, to allow students to see we're hearing and we are really going to try to move in directions that make them feel a little more supported and connected and heard and seen. You're welcome.
I will just add one other thing to piggyback on that, in that I think that's also the beauty of the small learning communities, or the small communities that we're trying to establish at the buildings, because when students feel that connection with themselves and with another adult, they're going to be more open to share. And so I think exactly what Marvella was saying, we can add in those opportunities for them to give us that honest feedback, and then we can process it from there. So that is a benefit of having those in place.
I think that's wonderful, and I think it's really important, particularly because, I don't know, I have heard from even my own kids, when they take the panorama and they answer that question about sense of belonging, it kind of feels like you're dumping that into the void, and then what? So I really appreciate the thought that is going into the then what.
I appreciate
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you.
If I could add also, one of the things that Marvella actually was just talking with the administrative team about today was really trying to dig in more deeply in a personal way in looking at that panorama data. You know, we've looked at it globally, and we've tried to do some large scale teachers at the door greeting students, you know, some of those larger scale things, but now it's time to really like dig in and look at those small groups and look at those common trends among kids and get more information.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So as Mrs. Elliott mentioned, I was the co-facilitator for the diverse staffing team this past year, and we did have a singular focus. So our goal for the goal statement there was to align the hiring and retention of certificated candidates from underrepresented groups to reflect our student community through strategic marketing, recruiting, and developing a robust pipeline. So that's a lot. And we had lots of great ideas, but we tried to stay, you know, really concise and make sure that these were action steps that we could achieve in our first year. And we had a great team working together to be able to do that. So for year one, we had 4 action steps. 3 of them we were able to complete, and one is one that we completed work, but will continue into the future. So the first one was related to that recruiting part of our goal statement. It was to develop and implement exit surveys for staff and analyze the information from those employees from underrepresented groups. The second action step was to develop strategic partnerships with historically Black colleges and universities and local and national organizations with the goal of recruiting teachers from underrepresented groups. So that was related to our hiring. The third action step was related to developing a support system for staff from underrepresented groups. So that again is retention of our staff. And then finally, we had an action step of training our administrators on a robust and inclusive screening process. That's also related to the hiring part of the goal statement. And the reason for that last action step is one of the things that we heard, particularly from our parent group that we worked with, was how can you just see more candidates? How can you just get more people in the door so that we can be, getting our information out to candidates and then getting candidates into our district. And one way to do that is to make sure that all of our administrators are trained to help participate in that recruiting and hiring process. So, whoop, am I hitting the wrong thing? There we go. So a little bit of data. You've actually already seen this slide. This was our baseline data that we shared in July of 22. This information was collected when the equity team came together and started to look at some of the demographics of our staff and students. So this is the 1920 data, and you can see from those graphs the difference in demographics between our student population and specifically our certificated staff population. That was one thing that the action team was really interested in, was targeting those certificated staff members. They tend to be the staff members that our students are seeing most often in our schools, and also the ones that are the most underrepresented in diverse populations. So we did intentionally target that group. The next slide is going to show you our, what am I doing wrong, guys? There we go. I don't know why it's not moving. So the next slide is our 22-23 staff and student demographic data. So what you'll notice, the numbers are kind of small there, but some small shifts. And one of the things that I wanted to point out was 22-23, it was our first year of implementation, and you heard some of the action steps that are taking place. So we're looking at long-term shifts in these numbers. We're not expecting huge shifts in our first or even second year. But we did see a little bit of shift, like I said. We saw an increase of 0.6% from our baseline year in our Black African American staff, an increase of 0.7% in our multiracial staff, and an increase of 0.1% in Hispanic. For Asian, it went down 0.2%, and I wrote the wrong thing down here. I think the other one was Hispanic, I think went down. Nope, that one went up. Sorry, I wrote the wrong thing on my list. Which one am I missing? Oh, maybe I just repeated myself. I think I wrote the same one twice. Yep, I got them all. So one of the things I also wanted to point out, which we talked about in July of 22, I didn't put the slide back in here, but some of the challenges that we face in making those shifts that we really want to see in our staff demographics. You'll recall we talked about the students who are coming out of universities and the diverse nature of those students. The last data collection that we had through Title II was in 21, but just to give you a quick recap, of the students who were completing education programs in the state of Ohio, across the state there were 96 total Hispanic students, there were 44 total Asian students, 142 total Black and African American students, and 86 students reporting as multiracial. So there are a lot of districts and schools that are competing for a small number of students coming out of colleges. So one of the things we did see, and we'll likely share more about in the future, is we are also looking at recruiting from other districts and other ways that we can bring more diversity to our staff in the future. There we go. Another slide that I added, I took a quick look at the number of staff of color that we have added to our certificated staff population since 1993. So you can see the increase that's happened, not a huge increase. Those are actually number of new hires. But in 22, we definitely had the highest number that we've had since 1993. And you can see that I think just with some intentionality and really awareness around our practices and thinking about being intentional with diversifying our staff, that in and of itself has allowed us to be able to make some gains there. So back to our action steps. So back to the goals and what we were able to complete last year, we were able to revise our exit surveys. We added some very specific and targeted questions to already existing exit, did I say action? I meant exit, to our exit surveys related to how staff were feeling about the initiatives that we have going on, if they were feeling supported, and if there were other things that they felt that we could have done to help support diverse staff in our school communities. So we'll be analyzing that data once our action teams start to meet this year, but we did collect it last year. We also worked on our strategic partnerships. We worked on developing a relationship and attended the Central State Job Fair. Mr. Lamar attended that job fair, and I believe it was Mr. Barboza this year. There were very few, unfortunately, education majors that were in attendance at that job fair, but still it's great to have that representation. We made contacts with other universities where, through the Title II data, we were able to identify that they had a large population of underrepresented students. So we worked and made some contact with Kent State, Bowling Green, Kentucky State, and Martin University. And then we did take a look at some places where we might be able to increase our presence, such as community festivals and events. So we're looking to have some attendance at those in the future, things like the African American Male Wellness Walk, the Asian Festival, and the Latino Festival and such. Honestly, I don't feel like we can take credit for this. There were 2 support groups that actually started for some diverse staff in our community, but they really were grassroots efforts this year. So our team was happy to support, but we don't want to take credit for that because other people really did help with that. The 2 groups that started were the LGBTQIA+ employees group and the Black employees group. And I know you all have seen those invitations go out, and they're starting to go out again this year. So we're really excited to continue to support those groups and expand that in the future. And then finally, we did complete the training process for all of our administrators on that structured interview. So we're excited about that as well. And that's all I have, so I will take questions.
Questions on the staffing? I didn't ask for comments. I asked for questions. Okay, go ahead, Mrs. Horn. Sorry.
In regards to the Eastland Fairfield program, teaching program that we have here, what's that diversity of students that are in that program?
That's a really good question. I don't think I know the answer to that.
I don't know it either. I'd have to look it up. I don't know that.
Because I know that, I think that some of them have presented to us, some of the students that have been Kahana students that have gone through that program, and with it being housed here, like, how is that an opportunity for us to leverage to try to?
That is year 2. Okay. You'll hear about that soon.
Okay, wonderful.
Yep.
Thank you.
We're excited to partner with them and try to expand that program. Yep.
Yeah, I remember having conversations about that too, and the idea was to help try to recruit into that program. That's year 2. Go ahead, Mrs. Coates.
On that, for global scholars, I didn't know if there was anything there too with the global scholars community.
Yeah, like I said, in year 2, we're going to start taking a look at those students and where we might be able to recruit and encourage them, really even younger than high school, trying to get some of those programs we've been able to move down into the middle school and even below. So yeah, getting those conversations going and trying to get connected with those type of groups, I think will be a good next step for us.
Going back and forth determining if I'm going to take the mic. One other thing that I will add, and just kind of the connector of all of the action teams, is also making sure that students' experience through school pre-K-12 is positive. All students, because we also say, like, if students have negative experiences, why would they want to come back and do that long term? So, when we're talking about the learning communities and connecting and the peer-to-peer modeling and all of the other action teams, how they fit are also going to help to strengthen the pipeline.
That's a good point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I am going to talk a little bit about our Community Engagement and Partnerships Action Team. We had a small but mighty team of 7. And I feel like we really accomplished a lot last year. On this particular slide related to, developing a process for inclusive communication, we were able to complete 3 of our 4 action steps. And then on the next slide, we were able to complete all 4, so 7 of 8 over the course of the year. We had our first action step related to our communication survey. And you all have heard a lot about that communication survey over the course of last year. There were 3 phases. We had electronic survey that went out, we had paper copies that went out, we had phone calls that went out, so that we could make sure we were capturing information from a wide range of our stakeholders, and also really focusing in on some of those some of our marginalized groups as well. And so this next slide just highlights some of the data that we have already seen and looked at related to communication method coming from teachers, principals, and the district level. And so you can see text messaging, interestingly enough, is, or some sort of a messaging app is of interest with regard to communication from teachers. At the principal level, both text app and email, and then at the district level, primarily email. And so that's, you know, something that we've been taking a look at and certainly have made some shifts on. This slide highlights the communication frequency. And so you can kind of see the breakdown across the teacher, principal, and superintendent district level. We have focused in primarily on the principal, superintendent, district level, and trying to be kind of responsive to this. And so we know we've made some shifts to our district-wide newsletter frequency. We have our principal communication going out weekly from every building. And so those are some of the ways that we've taken a look at this information and put some action into place. And then the final piece of our survey just looked at, you know, what are the types of information pieces that you're interested in getting. And so certainly school events and praises and concerns about students are, you know, up there at the top. And so we are working really hard to make sure we're, you know, communicating about events and certainly, you know, getting that personalized communication coming from the building level. The next action step we had was related to communication and translation services. And so we did some research. We previously had been using talking points across the district with our EL staff. And so this is something that we're currently lifting to get used at the district level, principal level, and then the classroom level as well. So Mr. Starkey and Judy Hengstebeck are helping to kind of lift this. We just had some training, I think this week, right? Or next week? Yep. Next week, there's some additional training to start at the district level so that we're making sure that we have the ability, when we're sending messages out, for families to receive it in the language that they are, you know, they prefer to receive it in, as well as be able to communicate back in their native language or chosen language, and it come to us in English. So really looking for ways to kind of expand that communication tool. Action step 3 and 4, the clear communication process, and then updating communication resources. And so I talked a little bit about the shifts we made with the district communication and building communication. We also have officially rolled out the new website, but we're continually developing it and adding things to that. So that's been, I think, a helpful tool for our families to have a more user-friendly website. And then one of the things that has been a tremendous asset to our district is updating our enrollment process. And so Jen Korn and Dr. Boyle worked really hard on putting some new structures in place for our EL families to make sure that we are supporting families through that process, which is sometimes overwhelming with all the paperwork, and having specific designated days where we've got translation services to come in and we're able to get some of the screening taken care of. So it's more of a comprehensive experience and not broken up and choppy and, you know, without a lot of guidance. And then, as you all are aware also, we made some updates to our school calendar, starting specifically for the 23-24 school year, where we were able to make some adjustments so that we have additional inclusive holidays recognized for students to be able to be with their families. Regarding staff, we also have the ability, you know, because on some of those days we do have professional development happening and things like that. So we always are working with our staff when they need to be observing those holidays as well. Moving into goal statement 2, this is related to developing and sharing community resources, and we spent a lot of time this year inventorying existing resources that we have in the district and kind of compiling a community resource guide, which is currently up on our website. So this was a great opportunity for us to tap into our parent advisory group. We were able to share some of the resources that our internal stakeholders had been using, our counselors, our mental health specialists, social work support, GJEF, and then go to our parent advisory group and say, okay, this is what we have. What are some other ideas that you all have or have experience with? And then ultimately landing on, it's a pretty comprehensive list, but certainly, we try to not make it overwhelming for individuals, but it's broken down by category, school resources, mentoring resources, parental support, low-income housing resources, employment resources. So just a variety of resources for our community to access. And we will have printed copies in the buildings that principals and counselors can be using when appropriate for families as well. Another thing that we did was, sorry, okay, oh, I went too far. Okay. It was identified very early, the need to get some definitions together so that as we are talking about the work we're doing, we are all on the same page about what we mean when we talk about marginalized groups or underrepresented populations. What do we mean when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching practices? And so we had a very, very in-depth process of identifying which terms we needed to be defining, specifically the terms that are found in our goal statements and our action steps. Our parent advisory group did a great job helping us identify those words. And then we had a process where we looked at a wealth of resources to pull together like our initial draft. And then we got feedback from every action team, our administrative team, our parent advisory group. We came back, we edited again, we went back for more feedback, and ultimately landed on a resource that we were able to put out recently as a tool for everyone to refer to. So we are definitely proud to have that completed and available for our school community as well. And then the final action step for this particular focus area was to provide community engagement opportunities around school-based topics. And so last year, we had our Gahanna Forum focused on school safety and well-being for our students. You all attended. And so we were able to partner with the City of Gahanna, the police department, and had administrators available to share some really important data, information about our district and some of our plans for supporting our students in a collaborative way. And this year, we are excited to be launching Community University, which is actually one of our year 2 action steps within our equity plan. And so more information went out about that today to staff, and we'll continue to kind of grow that process. And also, I will say, we also had our first family focus group for our school start time project. So just lots of opportunities to engage our stakeholders, and we're excited about that. Questions?
I have a question.
Mr. Mealy, go ahead, and then Mrs. Coates.
All right, a genuine question. For the resource guide and the other guide that you talked about, I can't believe it. Like, that's so amazing. And I just can picture the conversations, et cetera. But my question is, are you planning on promoting it, putting the word out, or are you going to be implementing it first, like you talked about, which is wonderful when you're having those meetings with families to have those resource guide right here and talk about it and share that info. So how are you planning on spilling it?
Yeah, absolutely. So they're currently on our website now. We also will have, like we said, paper copies for, those situational instances where we know someone might need some assistance with food and meals or family and, housing. We also will, I'm sure at some point in the near future, just provide an update to the community about some of the work related to our plan, where we'll be able to share that information more broadly. But definitely want to continue, getting these resources in the hands of our stakeholders so that they understand what we've been working on and how committed we are to this work.
Beautiful, thank you.
Just a quick question. Since I don't have kids in the district anymore, the text messages that were mentioned earlier, is that happening?
So we do have text messaging apps being used, not in a consistent manner across the district at this point, but we do have Class Dojo, we've got, there are a couple different ones being used. The goal is that Talking Points, though, will be able to be that resource to provide more immediate access to that communication.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. A lot of great hard work. Thank you.
Yeah.
Soren?
Kind of to piggyback on what Dion was saying in regards to the resource guides, and I think it's great with all of the translation. How does that work, though, as far as the guides themselves? Like with our website as well, it isn't converted into the language of their choice, right? So I know from a direct communication back and
Right.
forth we can do that, but what about the actual resource guides? Because to me, it would still be overwhelming if I'm not a native English language to get a set of papers, and I'd say, I don't know what this means.
Absolutely.
So do we have that within our next action step?
That is a great question. So we are continually expanding the documents that we are having professionally translated. And these will definitely be documents that get professionally translated. We, as you know, we put out a lot of, letters and resources and things like that. But we'll definitely have these in translated versions.
Other questions? Okay, thanks, Mrs. Elliott.
Good evening. Okay, so I am one of the facilitators for the Inclusive Curriculum and Resources Action Team, and we spent a lot of time working last year. So as Mrs. Elliott had mentioned, when we first started, there were over 100 staff members that were a part of the different action teams, and our inclusive curriculum and resources was really large that year. And we did a lot of work starting in the spring of that year, it was spring of 22, developing, along with this first first goal statement of diversifying our instructional resources, starting to develop the equity reflection tool. And if you remember, I had shared before, so when we were thinking about, we wanted an opportunity and a space for our staff to have some self-reflection with the learning that was taking place, and also for us to determine what are going to be the best next steps moving forward with that learning, with helping staff as we are diversifying our resources, as we are improving our instructional practices to really meet the needs of all of our students. We needed a way to be able to capture that information. And when we started to explore different equity audits and tools that were out there, we didn't find one that really kind of encompassed all of the things that we were looking for. So we decided as an action team to create one. And so we started in the spring of 22 and did a lot of work in spring of 22 developing that. Then we went home for the summer and came back, and the team was a little different. It was a little smaller. There's 14 of us this year. And so there were some new people on and some that were consistent, but with fresh eyes, we started looking at the work that we did and determined that we needed to do some revision, because again, there was a lot of work that was put in, and we pulled from a lot of different resources. So we spent a good chunk of this past year doing that revision, making edits, taking out some of the redundancies, and really finalizing the equity tool. Because of that, the 2 steps of training the staff and then actually having staff use it did not get done last year, so it is moving into year 2. But to give you a little bit more information about what was created, so through that, this is a snapshot view of what our equity reflection tool looks like. And as I had mentioned, we pulled together several different resources to make what we have as our GJPS reflection tool. It is composed of 7 different sections that all have different indicators within those sections. But they are meant to be done independently. So you can kind of choose your own adventure depending on where you feel like you want to have a reflective moment and start your journey of learning in that space. The goal is, though, that staff will get through all 7 and have an opportunity to do some self-reflection. There are some of the sections that are truly meant to be individually reflected on, and then some that are better suited to reflect as a grade level team or a PLC, because it might be like practices that we're doing within the scope of our grade level or the scope of our curriculum map, things like that. So having that opportunity to be able to reflect with a partner and to reflect individually is built into this reflection tool. And then, as we had mentioned, so we talked about being able to start with the instructional materials section. And the reason why we decided on the instructional materials to start with is because that is an area that a lot of our staff had already started to explore when we started moving into this work of equity, really taking a look at the texts and the articles and the pictures and the things that we have in the classroom to help with instruction. And so it was a nice space to use as the training model on how to do this reflection and kind of how do we continue to move to the right on the reflection tool. As we were kind of processing this as an action team, though, we were trying to think about a way for staff to truly and authentically reflect on where they are in different spaces, and also how do we get some information to be able to support the work and their learning as they continue to move on. So what we decided to do is kind of develop it in two parts. There are several indicators that have they're kind of like on a scale that could be done kind of multiple choice like in a Google form to be able to give us some quantitative data in some areas. And then there are some components that can be done in more of a narrative fashion that they would do independently and hold that for themselves and then be able to share if they would like. But we would be able to capture the information that they use in the Google form so we could see if what trends are coming across where staff are kind of rating themselves and how can we continue to support them with the work that we're doing as a curriculum team, as a grade level team, as a building team, so forth and such. And so the goal is for the tool to be shared this year in by November, having them to do the instructional the instructional materials component, as well as any of the other components that they feel compelled to do. And then again, over time, as the years go on, we will have staff walk through all of them. Oops, too far. Whoa, it went back to the beginning. No, it didn't, sorry. We're having a lot of technical difficulties here. It doesn't want to go back. It's not going back. You went too far. I know, I'm trying to go back. Go back, yes, go back to the yellow. Right there. Okay, thank you. I don't know what happened, sorry. So then as we move into the goal statement number 2, and this is where we're talking about reframing and redefining, refining our instructional practices through the culturally responsive lens. What our primary action step in year 1 was to take a look at our absence data and see what trends we saw around like students and absentee rate, specifically around different holidays that fall within the calendar. Very much aligned with what Ms. Elliott had shared about the work with the school calendar. And so because what we were hearing before from staff and from students is that, there are different times in the year when, we might have larger numbers of students that are absent because they are observing their particular holiday. And then they have to come right back and make up all this work, or there's a big test that happens on that day. And so how can we be a little bit more aware and sensitive of that and kind of make some adjustments to our plans based off of what we see there? And so we did do that analysis, and again, that what we found is that the days that are listed here that had the highest absentee rates for religious reasons fall on the days that Mrs. Elliott had mentioned before. But those are the 4 dates that are there. There's actually a tie for number 4 for the 2 dates. So we've got an October 15th, a May 2nd, May 3rd, September 7th, and September 16th. This is where we saw the highest absences for religious reasons. But what we also noticed when we went through the data is that our attendance data is inconsistent. We do have some families that may not report it as a religious absence, so we're not capturing it in that way. We have some families that don't report it at all, and some of that could be just because they're unsure that they're supposed to report it. Some don't feel like they should have to report it. Some of that offense there in thinking about some of our Christian holidays and how we just get those off and we don't have to report those. So just some of those things. And so what we started to process as a team was, again, trying to look to see how we can be more inclusive in our school calendar, but then then in those spaces also, and this is moving into year 2, work for us is how can we help support staff with understanding where some of these days fall so that we can help them with some better planning in terms of their pacing and we don't have big tests scheduled on a day when we know a larger population of our students are not going to be there and then have to take away time from something else to be able to make it up, things like that. We also talked about taking a look at our attendance codes and making sure that those are updated so there's some consistency in there, and then constantly sharing out the information about how to call in absences, when to call in absences, and making sure that that gets pushed out through principals, newsletters, and things like that, just so the families are aware more regularly. And then lastly, like I said, sharing those dates. And so we started to do this last year and continue to do this now with Inside the Pride, where we kind of make note of what are some of those notable dates, not only just for staff to be aware so they can do their planning, but also, again, it's another learning opportunity for staff of what else is happening in the world around us and within the world of our students. I think that's it. Questions?
Questions over there? Just the question that I asked about to Marvella about the sense of belonging. I mean, I think that kind of fits in here too.
Yeah.
I mean, all of it overlaps, I guess. But I see on year 3, this forum that's going to be developed. I think that'll be great in helping identify where those opportunities for additional materials, resources, whatever, that maybe we're not thinking about. And then that wasn't really a question, sorry. That was no, I'm doing it. I have one other question comment. So we had, I don't remember if you were here, Ms. Holloman, or not, but we had an alum, I think she graduated in 2021, came and spoke to us at a regular board meeting about a piece of legislation that she worked on and helped introduce with our state representative to, I think what it would do, I don't remember exactly what it would do, but one of the things that I remember that the goal of the legislation was to help in create a hub for resources, curriculum resources for districts, curriculum and I guess extracurricular resources for districts to use. I think particularly for marginalized communities. That piece of legislation hasn't moved yet. It's just been introduced, but I didn't know if the group had that on their radar at all.
Yes, that's actually a part of one of our year 2 action steps. So we have not met as an action team yet, but when we meet, we'll start to outline what are our implementation tasks for those year 2, but that is a year 2 action for us. Because not only do we want to help teachers to understand and have a better awareness of their students, and also as we're talking about culturally responsive practices, but also then how do we help them, what tools can we give them so that they can actually implement it. So that's a part of it.
Yeah, so maybe if the legislation goes anywhere, maybe by then there will be a start to some sort of resource hub. But okay, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Okay, so I am with the Equitable Representation and Access Committee. We had 2 goals for this year as part of our programming. Our first goal deals with equitable access to enriched academic programming. Okay, Eric. So there's 3 action steps that we work towards. The first action step was really kind of what I get all geeked out over, which is a data dive. And so we did a really deep look at representation among those students who are identified as gifted, those who receive gifted services, and then at our high school level, looking at students enrolled in honors, advanced placement, or college credit plus courses regardless of gifted identification. And what we found is that our white and Asian students are very well represented in those courses. And unfortunately, our Black, Latino, and multiracial students are highly underrepresented in those courses. I wish I could say that's a surprise. That is the trend that we are seeing nationwide. We actually are slightly better with our representation than the state of Ohio as a whole, but there is still lots of room for us to grow and improve in that area. Our second action step deals with social emotional supports for students who are gifted or high ability learners. And so one of the primary things we did was collaborated with Concord Counseling Services. And so Concord would do monthly lessons in our elementary GATE classrooms on social emotional topics. And then they did monthly seminars at all 3 of our middle schools with our gifted students. Topics included things like perfectionism, motivation, overexcitabilities, different topics that are a little more common among some of those students. In addition to that resource, we started to develop some tangible resources, including a 2-page guide for teachers that's on our internal curriculum website. We also updated our Gifted Family Guide, which has been posted on our website and was announced in our Back to School newsletter. And then we've been sharing little Raising Your Gifted Child kind of tidbits in our quarterly parent newsletter as well. And then the third action step deals with professional development related to the needs of gifted and high ability learners. This district has spent many years providing ongoing professional development to our classroom teachers who provide gifted services on an official basis to our students. Last year, we took it another step and incorporated an introductory professional development for all of our 2nd and 3rd grade teachers to try and raise some awareness of the needs for those grade levels between when a lot of our students are identified in 2nd grade until they receive services in 4th grade. So we just tried to make those teachers a little more aware. So action step 2 deals with our MTSS process, particularly helping to support the implementation of our MTSS teams with a focus on reducing disciplinary referrals and special education referrals, in particular for our marginalized student groups. You can see we have 4 action steps. We really hit home on 2 of them, and then 2 will carry over into this next school year. So like our first goal, we started with a dive into data. In particular, we looked at exclusionary discipline data. And when we talk about exclusionary discipline, we're talking about those instances when students are removed for an emergency, suspension, or expulsion. And again, we tried to look at that proportionate representation among our student groups based on race, grade band, or gender. And what we learned is that, again, our Black, Latino, and multiracial students experience exclusionary discipline more frequently than other student groups. And then at the K-8 level, males experience exclusionary discipline more frequently than females in those same grade bands. When you get to high school, there's no difference by gender. The other part of this goal is to look at our implementation of positive behavioral intervention and supports, our friendly PBIS plan. Again, that's something that's been in the district for a while, but really emphasizing consistent implementation with fidelity. So the team started to begin looking at our practices using some monitoring tools. We are just getting started with that, and we'll continue to use monitoring tools to look at our implementation of PBIS moving forward. Okay. Any questions?
Is this the I have a overall question.
This is the last action team, or I'm sorry, focus group, but I just have a quick close.
Okay, then I'll hold my questions until you're done.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Eric, if you'll just go one slide, I don't think you need to click through all of them. The main intention of tonight was to really let you see all of the work that has been done over the course of the last year. We are gearing up for year 2 implementation at this time. We reached back out to our staff to re-engage. Certainly we want anyone that wants to continue to stay on teams, but we also want to make sure we're not missing our new staff that might want to be engaged in this work. And so we have 39 staff members who are going to partner with us this year on our 5 focus groups, our 5 action teams. We have meetings that will be beginning as early as next week to start the implementation task drafting. And so the very first slide that I had added in, just to give you guys a snapshot, you see the pretty goal statements and action steps, but the nitty-gritty work happens in this huge spreadsheet with every action team in it and multiple lines so that we really understand what all has to take place in order for us to get a reflection tool created for instruction, what has to take place to get resource guides put together. So we'll be beginning that work with our action teams here in the next couple weeks to get our year 2 implementation tasks outlined. We, just at a high level, and, you don't have to click through the slides, but you all have them in front of you, we'll be working on extending the small learning communities. We'll be working on refining the peer mentoring program, and I'm really excited about that because Marvella has a lot of really great ideas. We'll get in that celebrating our community publication and start to talk about festival work. We will be working more with exit surveys and expanding those partnerships and building that pipeline, ways to build our pipeline. We will be working on rolling out talking points and hosting community university and making sure that we are looking for ways to partner with our business community as well. Engaging with the reflection tool on our teaching strategies and resources, and then working to create that hub that Ms. Holloman was talking about. And then also working to just communicate better about our enriched programming, removing barriers to access for those, strengthening our MTSS and PBIS programs, and continuing to look at our exclusionary discipline practices. We will continue to engage our Equity Parent Advisory Group. We have our first meeting on October 18th. We actually had to reschedule our meeting date because when we reached out to our team, we were needing to replace 6 of our members. And so we have a team of 16 last year. 10 of them are returning. We're going to have 6 new members that our building principals are helping us to fill those roles, and we were able to go back to the initial interest surveys as well to kind of tap into people that maybe weren't chosen in the first go around. So we will continue to meet with our parent advisory group 3 times over the course of the year to share the implementation tasks, to tap into them as resources and hear about their ideas, and of course to have them be our accountability partners in the work. We are, as I opened with, I'll close with, we're really proud of the work that we are doing in our district. I feel like with the support of you all, the support of Dr. Deagle, and the support of our amazing staff and administrators, we really are committed to all of our kids. And I think in many districts, this work has fizzled a bit, or maybe doesn't see the action that we have been able to implement. And so we're just, really grateful of the support and proud of the work of everyone in the district.
It's really, really important work. Thank you. Yeah, I think we've got a few questions. I know I have 2, so I'll start with Mrs. Mooring. Go.
About that. The board will remember this from our OSBA dinner a week or so ago, but Dr. McPherson opened her talk that evening by describing 3 different families' approach to dinner, of getting dinner on the table or feeding their families. And, one was the cohesive, very traditional family. One parent worked second shift. But the reality was she was describing, in my opinion, what you all are doing, right? We're trying to reach children in whatever form that they come to us in. And so the overall goal is educating each child to relate it to her story. Every family ate dinner that night, but they got to it very differently. And I don't know if anybody else felt the impact of that talk that night, but it just was so real to think about how maybe people that can't relate to equity work, to have that as an analogy seemed to drive home for me. I don't know, and I don't if they recorded that night, but she did a really good job. Be worth listening to. And just anecdotally. So I can relate to not seeing curriculum, seeing yourself in curriculum. As a child, right, we'd go on vacation to Atlantic City, and my sisters, Anne and Joan, could run in those stores that have everything with your name on, right? They would all be able to pull something off, and I'd be like, here we go, right? Like, and it would always, you remembered that, right? Like, you didn't see yourself in that particular thing, and this is what our kids are not seeing themselves in the pictures in the curriculum books and on the bulletin board. So just overall, just trying to help people understand what this work is and why it's relevant and means so much to our students of our district. And thank you all for all your work. It's really good.
I don't have a profound statement like Daphne, but thank you for everything. But back to, I forget who was talking about the terminology. And at first I got really excited about that, but I also think there's a need for like all the acronyms that we utilize, because you all know exactly what they mean. Some of them we know, but I think if from a parent too, sometimes it puts people on the defensive. So I don't know if that was something that you're looking at, because they just don't know what that means, and finding a way to kind of embed that into some of our communication.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
Do you mean specific, like the acronyms specific to the equity work we're doing, or just in general in education?
I'm talking about all of it.
Okay.
But some of it specifically with the overlap with the equity work, because even like PBIS, MTSS, I mean, people will say that to me, like, I don't understand what that means, Sue. Like,
Right.
are they trying to hide things? You know, I mean, people
Sure.
come at it from a level of distrust sometimes.
Sure.
And if we can remove those barriers as well, with just being very clear with what we're talking about, I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
But, I mean, overall,
Makes sense.
it's outstanding work, and I appreciate everything that you guys have done. Look forward to hearing the next update.
Yeah, we do have MTSS, PBIS, we do have some of those things included in this, but we can just continue those conversations about the best way to support, families with all of the acronyms we use. There's a lot of them.
Questions over here? Go ahead, Mrs. Coates.
But just to echo everyone's comments, I mean, this is very detailed, disciplined work, and please know that we all recognize that, and I just want you to feel, I'm glad you feel really proud, because I feel really proud of what you're doing, and so thank you.
I just want to make sure. Did you have anything? Okay, I have easy questions. One, I think the slides that are up here there's a little bit more than what we currently have, so can we get the updated slides?
Yes, I apologize for
No,
that. There's
that's
two.
totally okay.
We realized we left out the panorama data slide, and then when we were adding that, it was like, well, why not let them see what the implementation
No,
tasks
it's
look
great.
like? So we'll make sure
It's
you get it,
great.
though.
Appreciate getting the slides ahead of time. It is really helpful to be able to digest, at least to a degree, before we're hearing the presentation, so thank you. But yes, could we get follow-up slides? And then on some of the slides themselves, there's mention of data that's not necessarily in the slides. We haven't actually seen some of that data. If there's a way to easily share it with us,
Sure.
that would be appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you. And yes, the work, I mean, this is, I don't want to, I mean, what Mrs. Mooring just said with the anecdote that we heard, it perfectly explains the purpose of this work. I do think that sometimes, I don't know, language barriers, word barriers prevent people maybe from understanding what the purpose of the work is, but the purpose of the work is that our students, all of our students, get the opportunity to learn. And that's the purpose of the work. So it is incredibly important. It is the reason that we are all here is for our kids to be able to learn. So thank you. And if anybody needs, I know this meeting is a little bit longer than usual, so please, if you need to go, you are more than welcome to go. Yeah, thank you. We're going to move on to a couple action items, I think. It looks like there are 2 items for action under letter D, financial business. I don't know if there's anything that you want to say first, Mr. Gooding, and then it looks like we have to take these individually, but is there anything that you wanted to say before I ask for motion?
No, I can. The first one, there are 2 memorandums of agreement involving the high deductible health plan and some issues with that. One is addressing the first one that we have. That plan goes away at the end of this year. And then planning forward, sometimes the IRS will make changes to the levels at the federal level. Our plan, in order to remain compliant, we have to increase the deductibles for the single plan by $200 and $400 on the family plan. And by doing that, it maintains compliance and allows our employees to contribute to a health savings account for that. If we're not compliant, they can't contribute into an HSA. So that takes care of both of those memorandums of agreement. If you want me to talk about the next one at the same time before we vote, we can do that too. We've also done a lot of work with the insurance committee. I think feels like we've done a ton of work with the insurance committee. So all three of these items have gone through that committee. Appreciate their work. The last one here is the only plan that we have left that we have to set rates for next year, because everything else we've been able to secure multi-year rates with no increases, which has been fantastic. So that addresses some short-term as well as long-term financial issues for the district. The dental insurance rates, it's a minimal increase. It's 4.2%. So it is taking the current single monthly plan from $33.42 to $34.83 on a total premium. So that's both employer and employee portion. And on the family plan from $99.10 to $103.29. Total overall increased cost to the board is just over $24,000. Very, very small amount in the grand scheme. So we're very, very happy to have this in place. And the reason we brought this forward for today at the workshop is because open enrollment, which everyone's excited about, starts October 13th. So that goes October 13th through November 3rd. So we want to make sure we had all the rates in place so that everybody knew what the rates were at the time they were making decisions about their health care for next calendar year. So. And so if you have any question, anything you want to say from the insurance committee?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure everybody understood the reason why was because open enrollment is starting. So we needed to bring it to this meeting versus waiting until the normal monthly meeting, which we most likely normally take the motions for anything like this.
Correct.
Let's get the motion on the table for the first item. So is there a motion to approve item number 1 under letter D, which is the MOUs?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Horn. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any discussion about that item, the MOUs? Or those? I know, it's getting real cold in here real fast. Okay, Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Motion carried.
And is there a motion to approve item number 2 under letter D, financial business, which is the dental insurance rates?
So moved.
Coates, is there a second? Oh, thank you, Mr. Manley. Any discussion about that item? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates? Motion carried.
Thank you. We are on items from our Chief Operating Officer, and I will turn it over to you, Mr. Hetzel, if there's anything you want to tell us before these are voting items, right? 2 voting items? Okay. If there's anything you want to tell us before we
Thank you, Mrs. Pickle Antonio. You have 2 items on there for tonight. One is routine. It's a disposal of buses. We're bringing in new buses. We're disposing of old buses. The other item is to approve to amend a motion from board action taken a year ago. We had mechanical contracts with Enervise, who provides our HVAC services. We reevaluated the contracts, and we've reduced the contract amount for a year. And then in the prior action, we had only listed an amount for 1 year, so we wanted to, one, reduce the amount per year, but then provide the total amount of a 3-year term. So that was an adjustment to a pre-existing contract.
Thank you, Mr. Hetzel. We're going to take these individually as well. So is there a motion to approve item number E1, which is amendment of the motion related to the, is it Enervise? Is that how you pronounce it? Enervise agreement?
So moved.
Ms. Mooring, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Any discussion about that? Yeah, nice job. Go ahead, Mr. Manley.
Just curious, do you have a goal to cut expenses every single month? I'm just curious.
Month. Yes.
All right, we're watching. Good job.
Any additional discussion? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Manley? Yes. Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Then is there a motion to approve item number E2, which is related to the vehicle disposal?
Moved?
Thanks, Mrs. Horn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Coates. Any discussion about this one? Okay, Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring?
Yes.
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Motion carried.
We are on letter F, general business of the board, and there is one action item. Is there anyone that wants to talk about this before I get a motion on the table? Mrs. Reed?
Yes, I just wanted to share a couple of things. For those of you who have been on the board several years, you know that some addendum committee work has been happening. So this has been a bit of an ongoing process. I think the final step in the work that was agreed to with GJEA, I think 2 contract negotiation cycles ago, actually, was this annual idea of an annual survey to continue to review those addendum positions. So last year was, last spring, actually in May, was the first year that we implemented that annual survey. It was created by the addendum committee, and they created some evaluation criteria upon which to review any requests that come in from staff members for changes or new positions to be added to addendum. So I quickly just pulled up the survey here to give you an idea of some of the things they were looking at. Obviously, not every proposal was able to be included in the recommendations, so the committee did evaluate everything that was proposed, though. The proposals, if they were at the elementary or middle school level, they were only considered if they were positions that would be available at all buildings. So it couldn't be a singular building focus. It had to be something that was going to be available to everyone at that level. And then finally, if they made the request, the club or activity had to be in existence for at least 3 years. We wanted to show that there was some sustainability to that activity before we decided to bring it in as an addendum. So those were a couple of the things that they looked at. So the proposal that you have in front of you tonight is the culmination of that work, those evaluation procedures. We vetted the requests with our building principals as well to understand the viability and their support for the positions that would be added. A couple of them are not necessarily new. You'll see the girls wrestling. We've had girls that have been participating, and that just continues to increase. So we're excited to be able to add that to our addendum schedule and get a full-time coach for the girls who are participating. And then some other things that have been going on in our district for a while that we really felt were deserving of being brought into that addendum schedule as a permanent position and activity within the district, such as like diaspora and things like that. So that is what we are asking for your approval on tonight.
Mrs. Reed, let's take a motion first, and then if there's any discussion. So is there a motion to approve item number 1 under general business?
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. Manley. Is there a second? Thank you, Mrs. Mooring. Any questions, comments about this MOU? MOA? Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll?
Mrs. Mooring,
Yes.
Mrs. Coates,
Yes.
Mrs. Horn,
Yes.
Mr. Manley,
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you to the work of the addendum committee. It is a lot of work. We are on director reports and discussions, and it looks like we are going to begin with Ms. Holloman from curriculum.
Hello again. I just have a quick update. So we just recently had our full day of PD on September 25th. And a couple of things that were a little different about this PD day. It was a full day of PD and learning for staff, which felt really good. And also, we changed the locations of our PD. So typically, when we do PD, specifically with elementary, kind of most people are in their own buildings and they're doing learning within their buildings. And so one of the things that we looked at with some of the big work that we have, especially at the elementary, is being able to pull everybody together. It's a model that middle school has used for the last several years, where all 3 middle schools will come to one space, and then they have some time to be able to do some building learning, but then there's a lot of cross department and grade level across the 3 buildings that they're able to come and do learning together. So we were able to do that with our elementary buildings this year, focused on the number corner work, and it was really cool to have like all of the kindergarten teachers across the district in one space, and all of grade 1 through K through 5. Preschool was at the preschool, high school was at the high school, and then because of that, it left a lot of our other buildings open, so several of our other groups were able to meet across the district for space. So it was really cool to just kind of have everybody, consolidated into a few spaces and doing learning together. Again, that opportunity for them to learn across with their peers across their content and grade levels was really cool. We have some very high-level feedback from the staff, and it's been very positive of the learning for the day. Again, being able to have the time to learn and then kind of reflect together, process, and start to talk about implementation all in the same day versus the halftime of just the learning and then processing along the way after that. So we're going to dive deeper into the feedback at our next PDAC meeting, which happens next week. And so, but very excited about the overall feel of what that first day of PD was now that we're in session and we are getting started with planning for October. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Holloman. Next, we're going to go to technology. Mr. Blackwell.
Good evening, President Pickle Antonio and members of the board. There we go. So today I'm just going to give you some brief updates on our security camera replacement project. As you know, we were awarded a large grant for security cameras, and we're required to make a small portion of that purchase this calendar year and the remainder next calendar year. There are several components that go into a camera system like this. That includes, of course, cameras, mounting hardware, cabling, video storage, servers, and software, not to mention all of the design and configuration work that goes into it as well. We looked at several systems and saw several software demonstrations where we brought in principals and assistant principals as well. And we ended up deciding to stick with the software we already have. Because a lot of the systems that we looked at are a single vendor proprietary solution where you have to buy their camera, their recording system, and their software, and you're locked in and you can't really mix it with any other systems. So we chose to remain with a more open system where we can choose multiple brands of cameras, commodity server storage, and even in the future, if we wanted to change the software itself, we would have the option to do that. We're working with a vendor to create that plan. We walked every hallway in the district with them, which took a full 8-hour day and was quite an arduous day for us there. And they've provided us with floor plans of every building that shows the camera locations, and what type of camera they recommend at all of those locations. And the next step with those will be to review those with our building administrators to see if they think that will meet their needs. And for this year's purchase, we plan to replace the recording servers. And that will be submitted for your approval at the next board meeting. So those servers will be housed at the high school, but will be used to record all of the cameras district-wide. Our vendor used the camera counts from the floor plans to specify the size and configuration of those devices. And we're choosing to purchase the recording servers first for a few different reasons. First is that even if we make adjustments to the overall floor plans or move a camera here or there, it's not going to change our recording requirements. And also, our current servers do not provide the retention time that we hoped for. And these new servers, as soon as we get them in, will actually take over our existing cameras. So even before we get the new cameras put in, these will be helping us to improve our retention times on our existing system. And also, our current recording server is no longer supported by the manufacturer. So we have some parts on the shelf to keep it going, but if it had a serious problem, we'd be in a tight spot with that. And getting all the servers up and running allows us to rebuild the core of the system, so we'll be in good shape and ready to bring all those new cameras on board next year. And that's it for me. Any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. Next, we've got special education, Ms. Wegging.
Hi, everybody. So this evening, over at the high school in the gym, we were fortunate to host our Learning Differences College Fair. And we were lucky to have partners in New Albany, Whitehall, and Canal Winchester partner with us for our 31st year of hosting this event. I was able to sneak in there before this evening, and there were 35 different colleges, universities, and post-secondary opportunity representatives there at the event. And people were rolling in. It was exciting to see. Some of the different agencies that were there included the Aveda Institute, 2 agencies from Florida and universities, some of our local universities, our state universities, technical colleges, Eastland Fairfield Adult Services were there, our ROTC was represented, as well as Ohioans for Opportunities for Disabilities. It provided opportunities for families, students to be able to visit different tables, being able to ask questions directly to the representatives, and gain more information about the agency, the college, or the university. Some of those individuals or families are just starting their plans for post-secondary, and some are finalizing it. It was exciting to see the different representation of students there, and seeing some of the students saying, and I was listening carefully, next year I plan to be here, and you could feel their excitement as they were talking about their plans after graduation. I also would like to share with you about the recently passed House Bill 33 that's impacting our district right now. There were significant changes to the eligibility for individuals who may be able to access the Autism Scholarship Program. So on Tuesday, October 3rd, students diagnosed by a physician or psychologist are now eligible for autism, regardless of their eligibility status here in our public school. So the eligibility criteria recently changed, including any student in our district who is identified by us as having autism, who also has an agreed upon IEP. That stayed the same, that hasn't changed. Autism has always been one of our 13 categories that we've identified as a student under IDEA. But now a child who's been diagnosed as autistic by a physician or a psychologist outside of our school, regardless of eligibility in our district, is also eligible to apply for the Autism Scholarship. So if a student qualifies based on that diagnosis under the new rule, we are required as a district to provide what's called an education plan. That education plan went into effect on Tuesday. ODE updated their system, which allowed school districts to upload these education plans, although they have not yet released information related to what they include or how, as a district, we should be developing those plans. So to be determined on that. We currently have 36 students who have accepted the Autism Scholarship so far this school year, and as of Tuesday, 2 additional students have applied based on this new House bill. Each student is awarded $32,455, so the amount of dollars funneling through the Autism Scholarship is over $1.1 million right now for those 36 students. As a district, we are obligated to continue to make sure that they are eligible for services under the new rule and the previous rule, as well as provide their independent individual education plans. So we have a team working on that for those 36 students, as well as anybody new who's awarded that scholarship. And then last, I'd like to share with you an event that's happening this month at the preschool here at Clark Hall in the parking lot. It is our preschool trunk or treat event, and that'll be offered here from 4:30 to 5:30. And if you want to see some really cute little goblins, I'm sure there'll be plenty there in the parking lot on October 26th. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Piggy.
You're welcome.
Did you say you had a question? Oh, okay. Sorry. Nope. We've got an update from communications, Mr. Starkey.
Good evening, Madam President, members of the board. I wanted to give a quick update to circle around on what I talked about last month, which is our Heart and Pride Award. So if you recall when I talked last month, it was just sort of an overview of how it's working. Now it's starting to work, so I want to give you an update on where we are in the process. So our nomination window was open for about a week by the time it went to all of our staff and our community, and we had 70 nominations in that week. And so when I say the nomination window was cut off, I mean for the month of October it was cut off, but the nomination window will always remain open. So we took those 70 nominations. The communications team worked with Dr. Deagle and Mrs. Elliott and our HR team as well to sort of vet those nominations and put together our strong list of finalists to carry on to our Heart and Pride Award committee. And so as a reminder, that's a committee. Right now we have 8 members on that committee. 5 of which are parents, 3 of which are retirees from the district who still live here and obviously are plugged into our school district as former employees here. And so the process is in their hands. They were sent the 10 finalists yesterday and all of their nominations, as well as their position, their building, and their how many years they've been here at GJPS, just to sort of paint a little picture of these staff members for them. And so our 10 finalists represent a wide array of positions in our district. We have obviously teachers, we have transportation represented, we have intervention specialists represented, and so it was great to see even in this first month just a variety of people being recognized by members of our community. And so our committee has until Wednesday of next week to complete their rankings, and then we will know our 2 finalists, or know our 2 winners for the month of October, which you will meet on October 19th. So definitely an exciting time. We're talking about, with this being our first month, just ways that we can continue to improve the process. And so one thing we're planning on doing is once we have our timeline really hammered out, we're going to add a sort of a permanent bug in each one of the building's newsletters for nominations, because we want, if a community member has a positive experience with a staff member, we don't want them to have to search through 3 months of newsletters to find that one link that they need to nominate. So that's something that we're looking to bring as we move forward through this process. We just want to get through it once or twice to really hammer out our timelines and how that works. So any questions on that before I bring up Trish to talk about the foundation? Okay, then I'd like to welcome Trish Miller up to the podium to talk about some of the great things happening in hopefully I said it right. Hopefully I said it right. To just give us some updates on what's happening in the foundation.
Thank you all for having me here tonight. It was really a privilege, actually, to hear what the Equity Action Team has been working on so hard over the past couple of years. And, you know, the foundation is really proud to support the staff and all that they're doing in the school district. Even through the grant process, things like requests for multicultural books. We've done things like we've supported some of the festivals that have been introduced, as well as the house system over at Middle School West. So we really, whatever we can do to support this work, we're really looking forward to helping you with that as you go forward in the year 2 and year 3. What I did want to talk about is, well, first of all, Diana, my coworker, is sorry that she's not here, although she's probably not sorry because she's out on the soccer field right now and it's not really so great. We had our mini grant cycle in the fall. We award mini grants that are up to $500, and the purpose of those mini grants is to support wellness, students that are at risk, as well as enhance curriculum. So we are very happy to announce that we received 86 applications. Our committee took a long time to go through those. It was a couple hours to sift through it and try to decide what we were going to fully fund, partially fund, maybe if something didn't fit our grant program. And so we did award over 71 grants for a total of $26,825. That came from our gala, from our United Way funds, as well as some private funds that we have, such as our Math and Education Fund. So we have some private donors that sometimes want to support specific causes within the school district. So we try to pull from all of those different funds as well. We were really excited this week to be at Middle School West, and I know that some of you were able to attend a project that was ongoing. We were contacted by the Cal Ripken Foundation back in April. They wanted to do a project with Gahanna. Niagara Bottling is here in Gahanna, and they used the Cal Ripken Senior Foundation as their vehicle for doing community service across the country. And they wanted to work with Gahanna schools this year. They had inquired about the high school originally. We explained that the high school was going through a new rebuild, and so we had them pivot over towards Middle School West, which was, you know, a building that's in need of some enhancement in the PE and recreation areas. So it was very exciting. The gym teachers worked very hard. Katie and Paul worked their butts off trying to get everything prepared and ready. Niagara came in, they worked for a couple days, and it was really exciting to see the things that they were able to do in the teacher's lounge, out in the playground areas. They added TRX and PE equipment, and it was just really exciting to see community members working at our schools. And I think it was fun for the students to see other adults in there working for them and putting in this new equipment. We hope that we can continue to build on that partnership with Niagara. I noticed you guys have Niagara water out here, which is great. The plant manager did extend to us, he said, if there's anything that you guys need for your PTAs, for your athletic teams, be sure to reach out to us for water. And I said, we will be sure to spread the word for you. You just need to pull up with the vehicle, tell them what you need, and they will let you have some water for your group. So that's pretty exciting. Very generous of them to be a partner with us. So we are continuing to work with other community members, such as our alumni groups. I know that Diana is going to be meeting the class of 73 and 74 this Sunday for their 50-year reunion. They're going to go on a tour of the high school, and that's it's a great opportunity for us to connect with alumni and maybe have them engage or re-engage with the school district, and we will continue to do that relationship building with them. We have a few events coming up. October 19th, if you haven't already heard, there is a STEM Fest at Middle School West. That is something that was funded by our Grants of Excellence from this past spring, that, you know, the gala that you all just attended. So it's kind of fun to see the projects and the equipment that is coming in and being put to use in all of the buildings. We have our Monster Dash, which is at the end of the month, which is a 5K, just kind of a friend awareness event. We're going to be doing that at the Blacklick Athletic Complex. We thought that might be a good chance for school families to kind of see all of the new fields, see the new tennis courts, see the new softball and baseball fields. Well, baseball's not due, but just to give them a chance to walk past those new facilities for the school district. And we had our gala planning committee this past week. We have probably 16 to 20 people working on that. Diana's a great recruiter. She's pulling in lots of new people with new ideas, and that's fantastic for us as an organization. We think that our theme this year is going to be Roaring 20s, because it's 20 years for the foundation and the gala. And so we hope you mark your calendar. It is 2/24 of 2024, so February 24th. Do you have any questions?
No.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And then, looks like last, we've got Human Resources, Mrs. Reed.
Good evening again, President Piccolantonio, members of the board. I'm also going to talk a little bit about House Bill 33. I know there have been lots of things in the news about that, and I wanted to focus specifically on some of the things that are going to impact the work of HR. One of the biggest things that we actually had a couple of updates from ODE and then some legal counsel at our recent OASPA meeting in Dublin. A lot of talk about the licensure changes that are going to be coming down the pike. So currently, we have resident educators who receive that 2-year resident educator license. They were previously limited to 3 attempts to pass the resident educator summative assessment, and now they will have unlimited attempts to pass that assessment. They will eventually need some coaching if they fail a couple of times, but the state is allowing them to take that as many times as they need to be able to pass, so that's good news. We also are changing that resident educator license, the alternative resident educator license, from a 4-year license to a 2-year renewable license. So it will expire after 2 years, but they'll be able to continue to renew it on an ongoing basis and complete the requirements if necessary. Probably the biggest change is with the regular licensure bands. So right now, the way that the licensure bands work, we have a pre-K through 5 license, we have a 4-9 license, and then a 9-12 license. And those license bands are going to be shifting to pre-K to 8 and 6 through 12. So that's going to require some pretty big programmatic changes at the collegiate level for higher education. So as we heard from the representatives from the Ohio Department of Education, it's going to take some time to get those programs aligned to those new licensure bands. So we'll hear more about that probably for 24-25. That's not going to take effect immediately. And that's the same with all of these. It's going to take time for ODE, who's in a little bit of limbo right now, just a little, to get through some of these changes, to work out the requirements, how everything is, going to play out, and then get those out to students and districts. They did also say that that districts can make the decision to allow teachers with those licenses to teach 2 years outside of their licensure band that they're awarded. However, that will still count against us on our state report card if we choose to do that. So it's a choice, but not really a choice. And then we will also, this is really new information, we'll have a pre-service permit that's going to be required for all of the students who are in our buildings from universities. So student teachers or observers or internship students will be required to get this pre-service permit. So they'll have to they've always had to have the background check, but they'll have to have the background check, and their university will have to sign off on those permits in order for them to be in our buildings. That permit will also serve for those students as a substitute license if they choose to serve and be paid in districts in Ohio. So that's an interesting idea that we're going to hear more about, I'm sure, in the near future. And then finally, they will also be issuing an alternative teaching license for military members. So those are some updates for licensure. Another big change for us is going to be the wrap-back system. So the wrap-back system is currently in place for all license holders in the state. It allows us to be notified if there is an arrest or a hit on a background check in between the 5 years that it's required to be renewed. Currently, ODE can only issue those wrap-back reports for the employees who have licenses. Those are the only people who are in the system. So ODE is now going to be required to include all employees in school districts. So those non-license holders are going to be added to that wrap-back system, which means eventually, once we get the guidelines from the state, we will have to re-background check any of our employees who don't have a license that have not been background checked in the last 12 months. So more to come on that as well. They will also be they will also be noting on an employee's profile in the Ohio ID account if there's any disciplinary action that has been taken against that employee. At this point in time, in order to find that out, you'd have to go to a separate page and system and actually search for the employee. Now you'll be able to see those actions right on the front page of their profile. So that will be helpful. And then finally, they're also requiring, there are lots of things in the bill, so these are just a couple of things that impact HR. But they're requiring some mental health training for our coaches, and we heard from ODE that that training actually has to be developed by the Department of Mental Health and Addiction, and then sent out to school districts for us to be able to add that to our systems to provide the training. So there's a very specific training that will be given to have our coaches participate in. So that's it for the House Bill 33 updates. Just a quick update on UKG and our implementation and progress on that. So we are knee-deep in data collection for the UKG system. We're working through what they are calling our employee upload. And if ever we were convinced of a need for a single source of data for our employees, we know it now. I really cannot say enough about Matt and Pam and their team and what they have done to help us get this data together. When we first saw the sheet that we had to get the data into, I think I counted today before I came in, there were 62 individual fields of data that we had to compile. And I think we had about 1,500 staff members that we had to compile those fields for. We had, at minimum, and Matt can probably tell you where else they got the data, we had the USPS data that was pulled, we had our Infinite Campus data that was pulled, and then also just the master database employee data that Rebecca Hall has been working on for us for the last 20 years. And somehow, Matt and Pam were able to get that data in usable formats so that we could import as much as we possibly could into the data file that UKG needs for us. I remember when we looked at that file for the first day, I wanted to fall on the floor, first of all. And Matt was talking about timelines and, how quickly we could get it done, and the fact that Jill had a data project that was on Pam and Matt's desk, and I think Tia had a data project that was on Pam and Matt's desk, and there might have been others, I don't know. And he walked out and he's like, all right, we'll work on it the next 2 days. And I think the email the next day was, these other things are going to have to take priority. And I said, Matt, I absolutely understand. Expecting that it was probably going to be weeks out. I think he had the data the next day. So just thank you. I know that that was not something he was expecting or his team was expecting, and I know it took hours to try to get those files even into some sort of usable format. If I were doing it, you would have seen me manually keying in all of those fields. So just really appreciate the support and help that they gave and are still giving. He's keeping us on track. We definitely need to continue to work on getting the information together, and UKG is anxious for us to do that, and we keep impressing upon them that our priority is to get this right, to get the system set up in a way that is going to work effectively for us in the end. So I think our team has been working really hard to try to do that. But it's been a tough process. So we are hopeful that next week we will have that employee data file ready to officially upload. We've been sending it back and forth with UKG for the last couple of weeks to test to see if the information we're sending them is correct and what additional information we need to add to get that upload going. So we're hoping that next week that will be our official final upload of that employee data. The next step then would be the testing of the system. So we are very excited. Any questions?
It's a question.
Oh, yeah.
So just remind me, so great work. I know that the data process can be overwhelming. But get it right, it will save so much time and effort. But can you remind me again what the timeline? Wasn't this something that we were looking to make sure that we were done by the end of the year? So how it overlaps with like payroll and all of our processes?
Yes, so we were targeting October for the go live date for HR. We were targeting payroll for the end of the calendar year.
So the end of October for the data?
For HR.
Okay.
And remember, go live is not out to everybody. Our system is live and active for the department.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So December. So I guess how does that interact with the payroll piece as far as are we on track? I mean, we all know how fast time flies.
Yeah.
And, even since the beginning of school and how we're in the first week of October, So December and the end of December will be here very quickly. So how do we look overall with our project plan?
I will say we're trying to be as optimistic as we can, and that's, we're now going to be incorporating a new payroll staff member into the mix. So we're going to see how that goes. I think we may have somebody that's accepted the position.
We'll know tomorrow.
We're still working through that. So we have that in there. So our goal is to have that up and ready for second semester. So as Shay was saying, it may be live, because their piece is going first and then the timekeeping piece is coming in second. So there's pieces in there that are in the timekeeping system, but also that we have to upload, that we're working with Matt and his team to get stuff there too. So we're working on that, so we can, we're probably going to start out with a pilot group, but like Shay said, we want to make sure we get it right. So we may start small before we.
So that's November for that pilot?
We're hoping to have it up and we're hoping to have it up and running by the end of the calendar year, whether that's the full staff or the pilot group, we don't know yet.
I got 12/31 in my notes from a couple of sessions ago for payroll. When would that change?
What do you mean? We're still targeting to have the system ready to go by the end of the calendar year. I'm not sure we said that, but I think that was what we're targeting for. So hopefully if everything goes well with the implementation, then we can do that. Once we get through this piece and get into ours, we'll have a better indication of that.
I think that the point that I was trying to get to in a project of this size and the number of people that it interfaces with is, who is the overall lead for that, and making sure that we have the timelines clearly defined. And to Daphne's point, like, how are we going to do, like, dual processing to make sure that everything is right? But, especially for payroll and all of the reports and all the quarterly things you're in, you either hit the end of the year or you don't hit the end of the year, because the massive amount of work that has to be done dually for the next calendar year is significant. So maybe we can try to take this offline and kind of have a more detailed conversation about it, but I think it warrants that, which is not really about HR piece of it, but it's the overall piece.
Yep. For sure. Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn? Nobody wants to go home. Thank you, Mrs. Coates. Is there a second? Thanks, Mrs. Horn. I know this was a longer workshop meeting than usual, so thank you to all of you. Mr. Gooding, can you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Coates?
Yes.
Mrs. Horn?
Yes.
Mr. Manley?
Yes.
Mrs. Pickle Antonio?
Yes.
Mrs. Mooring? Motion carried.
It is 8:27, and we're adjourned.